Now. Okay, my friends, if there's no other comment, we'll proceed with our class. We're just finishing up the chapter on karma, where as we sow, so shall we reap. And this is mentioned quite a bit in the scriptures. We just have another point here to make before we move on to the next chapter. The scriptures are written that makes it sound like there's any repercussions or punishments in the next world, or it's going to be for eternity. And Joseph Smith was given an interesting, several interesting revelations on this. He was told this, and now behold, I say unto you, never at any time have I declared from my own mouth that they, the wicked, should return. For where I am, they cannot come, for they have no power.
JJ, hang on a sec.
What's that?
There's a flash on the screen that said that AI Notes has left the meeting, and I don't know what that means, but I think your AI turned off.
Well, that's fine. I record. I'm recording separate from AI, so I don't even use that. Okay. But anyway, then he says, so in other words, there's a separation of the wicked and the righteous. But it says, but remember, all my judgments are not given unto men. So he leaves that open. In other words, a lot of people think there's an eternal separation. So if you don't live a good enough life or follow the spirit enough, you're never going to make it. But he says, remember, all my judgments are not given unto men. So he leaves that open in this revelation to Joseph Smith. He says, I never said they can come back, but in the scriptures, but remember, all my judgments are not given. So he leaves that open. And then he gives us another clue here as to why the prophets have made it sound like if you really screw up, you're going to be damned forever type of thing. And here he tells us why it's written that way. He says, again, it is written, eternal damnation. Wherefore, it is more expressed than the other scriptures, that it might work upon the hearts of the children of men altogether for my name's glory. So in other words, he's saying that, God allowed the prophets to give people the impression that, you're going to be damned to hell for all eternity. So you better make the best of this life, because that's pretty much all you got. And he says he's allowed the prophets to kind of give that slant to motivate people to try harder, because if they know there's reincarnation, then they're going to have a lot of chances. A lot of people will think, well, so what if I screw up in this life? I got another chance in my next life, and so on. So that's the one of the disadvantages of reincarnation, of having a knowledge of it, is, and this happens to a lot of people. Like in India, it's one of the reasons they haven't made more progress compared to the West, is they think they got lots of chances. So a lot of them just don't try as hard to make their particular life count. And whereas in the Christian world, they're scared to death. They just got one shot at it, so they give it all they got. And the scripture here says God allowed the prophets to teach this way, to have an effect upon the hearts of the children of men, to make them try harder, basically. But nevertheless, he says, all my judgments were not given through the prophets unto men. And so Joseph Smith clearly taught that there's no such thing as eternal punishment the way we think of it. He says it's called eternal punishment because eternal is one of the names of God. So eternal punishment is punishment or karma, cause and effect that takes place because it comes from God, but it doesn't last for eternity. He says anywhere where there's a punishment, there's an end. Where there's a beginning, he says there's an end. So so what do you think about that? Do you now most of the group here, I think everybody here believes in reincarnation. Has that had that effect on you? That you think, well, I got another chance, so I can screw up in this life, and it's no big deal.
I have
Or
some
does it
thoughts
have
on
a
that.
positive effect on you? Yeah,
I,
Emmanuel.
I was thinking, I was thinking that, I don't know if it was in Alma, but it says like, now is the time for men to prepare to meet God. I feel like that's good advice for every situation that you're in every life circumstance that you're in, that, you know, is to always prepare to meet God. But I also feel like what you were saying about the prophets are interesting because it kind of reminds me of like because I used to do direct sales for 10 years, and it reminds me of like how people who are used to working at a job, they need a manager to like breathe down their throat to like do something. They're used to someone telling them, do this, do that, do this, do that. And then they don't really do well in business because they're their own boss. And so if they're allowed to do whatever they want, that they say that's a blessing and a curse when you start owning your own business. And so I feel like when you learn the doctrine that you've been teaching, it's almost like you're your own boss. There's no one breathing down your neck. It's really just you trying to become a better person, but at your own time. And so I feel like it's better for sometimes prophets to be like the manager role and to say, hey, like wake up, like stop sleeping, because hopefully in one of those lives it makes sense to them.
Yeah, when I first started working for myself, I had a really hard time disciplining myself. I thought, wait, when I work for somebody else, you got to go there and perform. When you work for yourself, you have all kinds of excuses to screw around. But then after you do it for a while, you finally get in the groove, so you get the discipline. And that's a little bit like reincarnation. For the average person, uh, following the advice of the prophets to say to focus on this life is really important and make the best of it. That's they really need that type of focus. But for a more advanced soul, reincarnation is doesn't discourage you from excelling at all because you realize you go from point A to point B and you want to go to the next step. And to go to the next step, you got to focus just as much as the guy that thinks he's just got one life to live and has to focus on that. But I found
Yeah,
after I kind of absorbed the teaching of reincarnation, I wasn't less motivated at all um, to move ahead.
Well, you have to recognize that every person is responsible for their own salvation, and you can't rely on anybody else to make your steps for you, so it's like we all know cause and effect and karma and all of that. You're self-responsible, whether you're starting your own business or just moving yourself forward on the plane of evolution. It's all about you and what you do with what you know.
Yeah, yeah.
JJ, for
Nice if
me
somebody
also,
came along and did it all for you, but it's not going to happen.
So,
after coming to this realization that reincarnation is true, it makes no difference for me because with this comes the realization that all humanity is evolving, and if I don't evolve myself, I will miss the train.
Yeah, there's a lot of incentive still in reincarnation. Matter of fact, the problem with, say, eternal hell is kind of funny because sometimes people have a temptation. They think, well, I'll go to hell if I succumb to this temptation, but this 15 minutes of pleasure is going to be worth it. Artie had this insurance agent she had that kind of fell in love with her. And he was a devout Mormon, married in the temple and everything, but he wanted to have an affair with her. And Artie says, well, aren't you going to miss out on the celestial kingdom? He said, yeah, but it'd be worth it. And but I guess you didn't succumb to that, did you, Artie?
I guess I didn't.
she resisted the temptation more than he did, and she wasn't big on the eternal hell thing at the time. But he believed he would miss out on the celestial kingdom, but he was willing to do it if she would have an affair with him. But that was just before we got together. But so it's interesting that even though these people believe, a lot of people believe that if they screw up, they're going to go to an eternal hell. It still doesn't stop them. They're once they get a really good temptation where they're going to have 15 minutes of fame or 15 minutes of pleasure, they'll just say, heck with it. I'm going with the imminent pleasure now. So even though these scare tactics work for some, for a lot of people, they don't work because they don't understand eternity. I mean, eternity is a long time. I mean, when I was younger and kind of followed the regular church doctrine, I understood how long eternity was. Matter of fact, when I was a kid, I didn't go to church because I found it really boring. And I went once in a while, kind of felt like I should go now and then. I felt a little guilty about not going. And then I was playing around in my mind about whether or not to go. And then I was smart enough to understand that eternity is a really long time, And I was thinking in my mind, well, if I go to church for a lifetime, supposedly, and do everything I'm supposed to do, I'm going to go to a really glorious place for all eternity. And I thought to myself, eternity is a really long time. So behaving yourself for one lifetime and going to church, even though church is really boring, I thought, logically, it would be worth it because a lifetime compared to eternity is like a minute compared to a whole lifetime, or even an hour. Would I be willing to be bored for 1 hour to have a whole lifetime of everything I wanted? I thought that would really be a good exchange when you think about it. So logically, even though I find church really boring, it would be logical for me to attend, even though I don't enjoy it that much. So I thought, I'm going to make a deal with myself. I'm going to go to church for 6 weeks in a row. And then after 6 weeks, I'm going to assess, can I handle going to church the rest of my life? And so I did that. I made a commitment. I'm going to be a really good Mormon and go to church, go to all the meetings for 6 weeks, and then see if I can handle it. And so I did that, and I kind of started blending in with the other kids and making the best of it, and kind of being rowdy like everybody else was, and kind of irritating the teachers and stuff like that, and it made it a little bit more interesting. And so at the end of 6 weeks, I thought, well, maybe I can handle it. So, I started attending. That was when I was about 13 years old. And I did that until they threw me out. When Curtis and I both got thrown out, I was about, how old was I? 33.
I was like
Back in
27.
78, yeah, 78, 79, we got X'd.
Threw us out. They
Asking
did.
too many questions. But anyway, I concluded, that eternity is a long time. So it would be, if you had to undergo whatever you had to undergo in this life, if you had a total eternity of bliss. But think about it, get an eternity of bliss just because you attend a church or because you proclaim Jesus as Lord. That's would be out of balance reward for such a small input. And so it really doesn't work that way. Reincarnation makes so much more sense, where you get according to as you given, instead of a whole eternity of bliss and joy and peace for just proclaiming Jesus as Lord or something like that. But so anyway, I found that not only myself, but other seekers that are really sincerely seeking the light are actually motivated more by reincarnation because it's real. A lot of people, it's just not real to, so they will just they're black and white, so they just dismiss, put the possibility of anything negative out of their mind, and they go on the path of materialism. So what do you think, Annie? Are you there, Annie?
Yeah.
Okay. How does the knowledge of reincarnation affect you? Do you think, well, I got lots of chances, so I'll screw up all I want?
No, I never thought like that. I always thought like, well, I have to do as much good as I can because that's better for everybody.
Yeah, it's as you sow, so shall you reap. So you think, well, I don't want to have this bad experience happen again. So I want to make the correction. So my next life, I don't have to go through this again. And so really, if you think about it logically, it's a motivator if you see it in the right light. Okay, my friends, this chapter ends with a comment on.
Can I ask a question?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay. First and foremost, in response to what you said, one of the things I realized about from my knowledge of reincarnation, which is actually what I have gathered from a lot of your teachings, is the fact that any God who can put someone to burn in fire in all eternity, forever and ever, all around, is worse than the devil. And I got such feeling that the goodness or the goodness we hear or we receive from God is such that God cannot lead anybody into eternal fire. The burning continuously, maybe because of one crime or the other. So that left me that's such an awareness just came to me. That God doesn't think like that towards his own. But then you read about the story of Lazarus and the rich man, and how that the rich man died, and Lazarus also died. Lazarus was taken to the bosom of Abraham, and the rich man um, went to hell, as it is said. And then there was the story. You know the rest of the story, but I'm just thinking where reincarnation really, where what how can one understand reincarnation from that story about the rich man and Lazarus? Because the rich man asked Abraham to send someone to that he want to go back to talk to tell his family about the place where he was, and he was refused. And he said, if somebody from here comes, you know, back to life to start telling them, they will understand. So, but I'm trying to understand that story about the rich man and how reincarnation actually plays out in that story.
Well, that's a story I question that it's 100% accurate. That might be one of the stories that Jesus told to affect the children of men's hearts for my namesake, as the scripture says. But according to Michael Newton, regressed over about 10,000 people took to the life between lives. And he points out that everybody returns to the soul, which is basically a heavenly experience. But they have a detour. Some people have a detour before there, and they get trapped in this place, I guess you could say, where the rich man went. And but that's temporary. And we get trapped in that that zone because of our own thoughts, our own feeling of separation, our own feeling of unworthiness, and till we realize that it's an illusion, and then that we seek help. And then when the entity seeks help, then he's assisted in returning to his soul and preparing for his next life. And so anyway, it's that was one of those things, like it says here in this scripture, that eternal damnation was allowed to be taught by the prophets. It says that it's more express than the other scriptures, that it might work upon the hearts of the children of men. And so when people read that parable, you think, boy, you know, I don't want to be like that rich man. If I got wealth, and I don't want to use it just for myself, I want to help people with it. And so I don't have to undergo that. So according to the scripture, God allowed the prophets to teach in that direction, to influence men to do good. But a lot of the spiritual teachers did teach reincarnation on the side. They taught the more advanced disciples. Yeah.
I was asking, according to which scripture are you referring to?
You asked
you made reference. You made a reference that according to the scripture, that the prophets were allowed to teach men about eternal damnation, to condition their hearts. And I said, which scripture is this?
That's in the that's one of the Mormon scriptures given through Joseph Smith. Yeah, it's from the Doctrine and Covenants 29, verse 7. So it's kind of an interesting one, explaining why the prophets taught that direction. There's another interesting scripture dealing with reincarnation that people usually don't associate with it, about enduring to the end. Jesus said that he that endures to the end shall be saved. So what is the end that we have to endure to? It's kind of given in this other scripture. It says, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached to all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then the end shall come. So back 2,000 years ago, Jesus told his disciples, if you endure to the end, you will be saved. But when is the end? The end was thousands of years in the future. So how are you going to endure for thousands of years? You have to endure to the end. The end comes from the Greek word telos, which is appropriately translated as a consummation. And saved means in the Greek delivered. He that endures to the consummation of things will be delivered. And the consummation that Jesus was talking about would be thousands of years in the future. So the only way to endure for thousands of years, speaking of earthly time, would be to be reincarnated. You not only have to endure, and the disciples not only had to endure in that life, but they would come back again and again, and they were given the injunction by Jesus to endure until the consummation of his mission, which would last until he would reappear sometime in the distant future. So we not only have to endure to the end of this life, but a series of lifetimes. Okay, any comment on that idea? Okay, we'll move on to the next chapter. We'll just give you an idea of what it entails.
I think that was really insightful that you put that together. Endure to the end of time, or the end of the consummation of the mission of Jesus. I don't think anybody else has thought of it that way.
Yeah, when people read that, they just think to the end of my life, but it tells us when the end is. The end, it says, will be after the gospel is preached to all the world for a witness to all nations, then the end shall come. So
That hasn't quite happened
so
yet.
you have to endure through the gospel being preached to all the nations until the consummation, and the consummation is the reappearance of the Christ. So you have to endure for thousands of years. So yeah, it is an interesting thought, but when you look at it in that light, it makes a lot of sense.
Well,
JJ, please, can I just want to, it looks a simple question, but I just would like to hear you say something about this. What is the gospel?
the good news.
Well, normally
What is
it's
the good news?
associated with good news. It's Greek is a little bit different than good news. It's associated with basically in the Greek, the word gospel means a message that brings enlightenment, if I remember correctly. And so preaching the gospel is a message that brings you like closer to spirit, basically.
The translation to Hebrew, it means a message of both good news and light. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Good news isn't 100% accurate according, but it's more associated with stimulating message that will change you for the better, kind of the idea, if I remember right. I did a research on that and published it. I'll have to look that up. And it's kind of interesting. I think it's in the book, The Unveiling, where I talk about the Greek word for that. Give more a little bit.
Can I say something?
Sure.
The Tibetan, in the externalization of the hierarchy, says, what is it that you can do? You guys have a lot of knowledge, but there are things you can do, which uh, coincidentally we're all doing as a group. And he's saying that you need to spread the gospel of good news through teaching evolution, reincarnation, the laws of karma, the laws of group service, and all these things that this molecular group has aligned itself with these teachings of the Tibetan. And he says that's really how you're going to align with the message of the hierarchy. And he says our objective is in helping of the great ones and the rendering to them of that intelligent assistance which will make their plans for humanity materialize. And that they have to work through us as a group to spread this good news, this message of enlightenment that has to do with personal salvation and all the doctrines of that we've been talking about, especially reincarnation, he says, and evolution.
Yeah, one of the statements he made I found interesting. He says, the average person thinks that to be saved and everything, you gotta be righteous and be a good person and be helpful and loving. He says that's just a step. he says uh, he says that's assumed that the disciple is a fairly decent fellow. He says once you become a fairly decent guy, he says you got to be useful. He says if you're not useful, the hierarchy cannot use you, even though you're a good-hearted guy and treat your neighbor pretty good and all that. That only goes so far. To be a tool in the hands of God or the hierarchy, you have to develop some talent so you can do something to be of service in a way that furthers the plan of the Christ. And I found that to be a really interesting statement.
He also says uh, the masters don't really care about your personal foibles and your personal sins and your weaknesses. All they care about is results. They want to look down and see who's doing what, in the real world.
I also want to share. I love that saying that Saint Francis said, which he said, "Preach the gospel always, if necessary, use words."
Yeah.
Because I feel like we've become a society of people more talking about things and then not actually doing them, and similar to the Joseph Smith story, where someone who came into the city with no, you probably heard this before, but where somebody lacked a place to stay and some food, they just moved, they're going to follow Joseph to Zion, and Joseph says, "I feel bad for this person, this new member here." And then everyone was just looking at him and go, "Oh, yeah, we feel bad too. Yeah, this is really hard for him." And then he says, "I feel bad to the point where I want to give him $5. Who wants to add to this?" And then everyone started adding their money to that. So again, it's just he loved principles, but he also took action on it.
Yeah, and $5 was worth a lot of money back then.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that story too. It's a really good story. It's a little bit like the Good Samaritan. Okay, and now the next chapter is on promises unfulfilled. We'll talk about that next week. That many of there's been many promises that has been made to this, what we call the righteous, that didn't really happen. But does that mean the prophecy was incorrect, or does it mean that it could happen in a future lifetime? And so we're going to talk about that next week. And so any other comments anyone wants to make here before we sign off for this week? Well,
Yeah, JJ, I want to narrate. I want to narrate a little story to you. You know, I had an experience some time ago, and I think I died. And because I realized that I was not on Earth, I was not on this part of the world, and I had an awareness on the other side that I was dead. And I remembered when I was sleeping, I said, "Oh, so I'm dead. Oh no, what will my children do now? They can't see me anymore." And then from the lonely part where I found myself, I began to walk. I didn't even know where I was headed. I just headed until I found some a group of people, and they all looked so strange. I saw they were like humans. Some of them had, some were headless, but they were walking without head.
really?
Some had their heads, yeah, they had their heads divided into two. They had one side of the head, they had one eye, one nose, one side of the nose, but what the other side was not there. I also saw some people that had a hole in their hearts. The heart was whole. There was a big hole, but the body was moving. There was no heart. And I try to find out why they have such condition. And then I realized that they had the condition, they were heartless because while they were on earth, they were very heartless. So in their condition, what I saw in them, there was a very big hole where the heart is. There was really no heart there. And then I saw some people had one leg, some had one hand. And one thing I noticed there, what I saw was that
Are you there? Oh, it looks like we
I
lost his
saw that.
audio there. Oh,
No, can you hear me now?
yeah,
Okay, so I noticed there was terrible suffering. These people were laboring so terribly. They were restless. They had to work, and someone said, Who brought this man here?" He said, "He's not going to stay here. He's going to leave." And of course, I would never want to stay in such a place. But I saw terrible. I'm telling you my personal experience now. I don't know what that really meant, but that I'm telling you where I got to. And I saw these individuals in a horrible suffering state, and until eventually I remember that when what I can just call okay, and then I found out that I returned back to my body, and I woke up from my bed and said, oh my God. So I was dead. Oh Father, thank God I'm back. Thank God I'm back. Thank God I'm back. And I've been thinking about this experience where it was that I went. Could that have been the world of the dead? Could that have been what is called hell? How did these individuals get to this place? What I saw there was, I think it probably that is what is called hell, because the suffering was immense suffering. It was
yeah.
terrible.
Well, it's quite
So
possible your soul will give you this, as the scripture says, to work upon your heart for your good, to maybe motivate you. Because according to near-death experiences, about 95% of them are positive, and only about 5% are negative. And some of those 5% have some pretty gruesome accounts. And the thinking is that the ones that do have these shocking accounts have them to their soul gives them to them to kind of stimulate them to send them on the right path. And it's like that scripture we read that says that the scriptures are written that way that they might work upon the hearts of the children of men altogether for my name's glory. So, but I do find it interesting in the near-death experiences that only about 5% have that really negative experiences. And those that did have the negative experiences were often the ones that didn't seem to be fully dead. You know, the ones that had the positive experiences, their heart actually stopped, and they were pretty much officially dead as far as the medical establishment were concerned. But the ones that had the negative experiences, some of them were like borderline, you know, so they were still experiencing kind of in between life and death, so to speak. So anyway, that's some of the explanation on that. So interesting experience there, Moshe. I bet that motivated you to stay on the right path. But yeah. And those, a lot of people that did have that hellish experience, they it changed their life. I mean, they went from being on the material path to being as spiritual as they knew how to be from that point on. It scared the dickens out of them. So anyway, I'm pretty much go with that idea that those types of experiences are given by the soul to stimulate you to change your life. So anyway, really interesting discussion, and we will talk about promises unfulfilled, seemingly unfulfilled, in the next class. Until then, may the Spirit be with you.